and good afternoon. I'm Milton Jones, co-chair of the Atlanta chapter of NACD. On behalf of my co-chair, Betsy Camp, and our chapter board, we welcome you to the Atlanta chapter's virtual signature event for May. Our topic today is Leadership and Culture, the Tailwinds Pushing Delta Forward, a fireside chat with Ed Bastian, Delta CEO, Kathy Waller, a Delta director, moderated by Jim Boone, a member of our chapter board. We thank you and we thank them for being here and joining us today. We also thank our sponsors whose support enables us to provide programs and events like this that are essential to effective development of our community of directors. You can see their logos on the screen. We want to call them out by name. We thank Austin Bird. We thank BDO, EY, Grant Thornton, Houlihan Lokey, King and Spalding, KPMG, Meridian, Northern Trust, Paradigm Advisory, Pearl Meyer, Protiviti, PwC, RSM, and Stout. Before we get started, a few housekeeping points. Please mute your device during the program. The attendees are listed in the chat room, and please enter any questions you would like to ask in the Q&A box. Time allowing, we will ask your questions at the end of our fireside chat. And now, live from the Delta headquarters, here are Ed Bastian, Kathy Waller, and Jim Boone.
Thank you, Milton, and thank you, Ed and Kathy, for joining us this afternoon. I'd first like to start with congratulating you and Delta Airlines on winning the J.D. Power 2021 North American Airline Satisfaction Award for great client service. I'm sure you're quite proud of that.
Yeah, I'm proud of our people. Our people are the very best. Everyone who's on this event is a great Delta customer. I thank you all for tuning in. So you already know the great service that our people provide. So it was about time J.D. Power acknowledged Delta as the #1 airline in North America.
Great. Ed, in 2019, Delta had excellent financial performance, excellent customer ratings, had a ton of momentum going into 2020, and yet just one short year later, literally fighting for your survival. While you were taking immediate actions to save the business, those decisions had implications on the company's existing strategy and future plans. How did you balance maintaining those future business strategies while also having to make quick, important decisions to save the company?
Well, thanks, Jim. It was dramatic. You probably understated how dramatic it really was. We didn't have a year. We had days to adjust. We came in 29. We had our best year in our company's history on virtually every metric: our customer satisfaction, our performance, the financial, operational, all the work we were doing on innovation and investing in the business. And by the way, not just for a U.S. airline, for any global airline ever. It was historic performance. And we went from there within 30 days to having only 5% of our revenue within just a few short weeks. So we pivoted hard. We didn't have time to figure out what happened. I mean, because we didn't quite know all that was happening. We knew there was far more questions than answers. But we pivoted to a strategy that I talked about as our protect strategy. We need to, first of all, protect our people and our customers, their safety in this environment. We needed to protect our cash, our liquidity, to ensure that we were able to get through and not have to go, into some other worse place financially. Yes. But we also had to protect our future. I'd say, we're an industry that's been through our share of crises, from 9/11. Recession. We've have a history of going from crisis to crisis. The thing that was different about this one, in many respects, but one of the most important ones, is we prioritized ensuring that we were going to protect our ability to come out right at the start of the crisis. And it was important because there's a lot of technology that we're investing in. There's airport renovations we're doing. We're building the future of our airline. And we actually optimized it. We took advantage of the downtime when all the volumes were low.
When did it really hit? March of last year for us was when I realized things were really shutting down quickly. But when did you and your senior leadership team go, uh-oh, things are really got to change quickly?
Well, we were watching in January, seeing what was going on in China. We had just finished a substantial investment in the LATAM airline group, the largest airline group in all South America. We purchased a 20% stake and spent $2 billion in doing that. It was a big deal for us. And we were in Santiago, Chile. I had my leadership team meeting with the company and the family down there, and having a really it was kind of actually a nice social, as much business orientation, getting to know each other a little bit. And the main topic of conversation, quickly shifted to what was going on in China. Some disbelief. At that point in South America, there were no known cases, period. So people in South America were saying, we're safe down here. We're going to be good. Little did we know. And the big concern I had was our flights to China. So we shut down while we were in Santiago, made the decision with our team president to shut down the flying into China. It was about the third or fourth week in January when we decided to do that. I know it was politicized how the administration shut that down. We were actually 2 weeks ahead of the administration in making that decision for ourselves, because we weren't going to put our people in harm's way. And so from that point forward, we were watching it really carefully and watching what was happening in Europe, but still having not a clue as to the magnitude of what we were really dealing with. I got a sense of the magnitude on March 11th. When I was in my office, got a call from the White House. The president wanted to know where I was going to be that evening. Oh, wow. And I've met the president many times, and it's not, but he usually doesn't call and find out what I'm doing that night, and needing a phone number to reach me at. So I said, this is pretty serious. And that was the night, and President called, but Secretary Mnuchin called. That was the night that the president came on national TV and made the decision to shut down the transatlantic flying. And so that's to the point where we know, okay, this is going to be
for real,
bigger than anything we ever dreamt.
Mm-hmm.
Or didn't want to dream. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare,
to say the least. Kathy, you've been on the board 6 years. As Ed said, the industry has its ups and downs. So you lived through some of these, but now this pandemic crisis hits you guys right up front. So what did the board begin to do as this unfolded? As Ed just described, the management team started thinking about it in January. Where was the board during this the early days of this upcoming crisis?
So thank you for inviting me to be here, first of all. But the board was right along with management. They were informing us. I remember getting communications in January about what they were seeing in China. And then we had a board meeting in February where we started to kind of talk about it. But at that point, didn't realize the global implications. We thought it may be Asia that would have an impact, certainly China. And then I remember getting another communication, shortly after the board meeting, talking about the potential revenue hit. And then there was one in March where Ed actually sent this message and said, this is unprecedented for us. Now, they've been through all kinds of things. So when he said it was unprecedented, that got our attention for sure. And at that point, the board started having meetings twice a week. I think it was twice a week at first, and then over time it moved to the cadence of once a month. But that it was for a while, it was twice a week, and then it was once a week, and et cetera, every other week. But it was early on for sure that they were keeping us informed the whole way.
So did the board set up special committees, or was it more ad hoc on your interfacing with Ed and his leadership team?
So the board's committees are the structure you would imagine, but they also have a safety and security committee. And that committee became the Safety, Security, and Health Committee. And they were the ones that I was getting a lot of our information from. I sat on that committee. And they were the ones that were watching it, because they had to also watch internally for Delta itself, the number of cases and what they were doing for their people, et cetera. So no, the committee structure was a good one. The diversity of the board was good for what was going on. And so it was except for the additional meetings and things like that, it was pretty natural the way we got our communications.
I see. Thank you. Ed, what were some of the short-term decisions that you began to make in March when the magnitude of this really became very apparent. And still keeping in mind what you said earlier about the longevity of Delta and some of the great people that are part of the Delta family, both as customers and as employees. How did you balance those two things?
Well, the priority was to sit the airline down safely. So we had never sat the airline, absent 9/11.
Yes.
For a short week there. That in hindsight looks like it was a relatively speed bump relative to what actually we've now been through. But we set about taking the capacity down, trying to get a sense for how bad it was going to get. We didn't know. I think we were doing revenue forecasts almost by the hour at that point, and I got tired and apologized to the board several times. Every time we talked, the numbers were coming in lower, and finally stopped talking about it. I said, I just don't know. I just don't know. But we need to be prepared for the worst, and the worst happened in terms of total numbers. We needed to get the airplanes parked. We needed to get people back home. We had a lot of customers traveling, and they needed kind of return trips. We needed to get our people home to the extent that they could be home as the airports were clearing, as the flight schedules were coming down, particularly those people in the early weeks, Jim, that were more susceptible to the virus. We had our first death, I think, probably early April, and I won't forget that. It was just traumatic how quickly. And then, up in the New York area, we had a couple more shortly after that, which really, you talk about a sense of urgency when you see people dying. And so we just got to get our people home. We sent them home. We told them we're going to pay them. Anyone that had any kind of age or comorbidity or any, stay home and we'll pay you. Please don't come to work. And we did that. And we also set about talking to, it really started that date, that March 11th date I talked about with Mnuchin when I talked to him that first evening. About raising cash from the government, because we knew we couldn't survive this. Not the industry couldn't survive this on our own, given what was likely going to happen. So we were the initial industry that gave creation to the CARES Act. And, many other additional elements were added, but we started in earnest that next day with Mnuchin and the White House as an industry talking about the first phase, which was $50 billion. And it took about a month to get all the negotiations done and working 24/7, truly 7 days a week at all levels of Washington to try to figure this out and package it. It wasn't really until we knew that we were going to get that CARES funding that I was able to at least get a little sleep at night, knowing that we didn't have to consider even worse and more draconian options. And at that point, we then set about trying to keep everybody safe, keeping the airline quiet, and keeping people free from the virus. The other thing I would say that people probably don't have wouldn't be intuitive. We actually, for the early weeks, it wasn't that our revenues went to zero. They did, by the way. Our revenues went negative $100 million a day because we had all of the advanced deposits. Airlines working capital is generally consists of people paying for advanced tickets that we use as our working capital in normal times to fund our working capital needs. Our working capital at that point, we were sitting with about $6 billion in advanced deposits, and we were canceling all the flights. And so we were needing to get back hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that we had. So it wasn't just nothing coming in; it was going out on top of other bills and other costs we had. So it was a pretty scary time financially.
Yeah, it's just the numbers are staggering when you think about it. I mean, in 2019, Delta experienced $47 billion of revenue, and then 1 year later, not even $16 billion. Yeah. And your load factor, as you said, went from the high 70s down to
they were close to 90 down to 5. Yeah,
extraordinary. It's just extraordinary. So looking back now we're here today. Looking back now over this past 15, 16 months and that early days of really staring that crisis right eyeball to eyeball, so to speak. what have you learned? What has come out of this that makes Delta a stronger company?
We are going to be a stronger company coming through this. And certainly one of the things that we've learned a lot, not just as a company, but as a society, is not take for granted wellness and resilience, and gives whole new meaning and definition to those terms in our business, but I think in society more broadly. We are, the fact that, and thank you again for your mention of the J.D. Power Award, winning that award over this past year. When you think about how difficult this year was and the focus those customers that were traveling had on clean, the quality of the experience, reduction of stress in the environment. Our people did just a masterful job. In fact, our customer scores have gone through the roof. I mean, on Delta, it's really been a great time to be on Delta. But it was because we took every step. We put in over 100 different changes to our protocols, how we board, how we clean, what we clean, how often, the regularity, the fogging, the filtration systems, the middle seat block, the mask compliance. People forget, people have gotten accustomed to wearing masks. This was in late April. We were the first industry that required, and it wasn't, there was no federal mandate. Delta went out and was first companies that said, we're going to enforce masks on our planes. And everyone's, in hindsight, that sounds late, right? But at that point, people were still saying, do you even need to wear a mask?
Right. Yeah.
And then it got politicized. So there were so many things that we had to do to get people, back comfortable with the experience of flying. There's a lot of lessons in that about wellness and resilience and health, and how we're going to come back as a stronger company, not just financially in terms of our balance sheet, how we think about our balance sheet's resilience and health, but how we think of our people's wellness. And we think about all the mental toll this has taken on so many, physical toll this has taken on so many, the financial toll this has taken on so many.
Yes.
If we're going to be in the service business at the premier level that we consider ourselves to be, we have to think about how we take care of ourselves and our people in all those dimensions. And by the way, our customers, interact with that too. We worked very closely with the Mayo Clinic, throughout the last year, and wound up hiring Dr. Henry Ting, who was the chief value officer for the Mayo Clinic, which essentially is the chief customer experience officer in the Mayo's terms. He now works for me as our chief health officer. And his focus is not just getting us through the pandemic, we'll do that, but it's about how we bring wellness as to a higher state in how we go to market in the future. And I think it'll be something that will absolutely attract people to Delta going forward as well, both customers as well as employees.
So if I could add something to what Ed
Yes,
said,
please.
because it's not a learning for Ed necessarily, but it should be learning for everybody else. And he's probably tired of hearing me say this. The way in which they communicated with people was outstanding, not just with their employees, but also with their customers. I mean, there was I didn't count how many communications there were, but they were constant communications, keeping people informed and keeping people so that people understood exactly those things that he just talked about, that what they were doing to keep their employees safe and to keep the customers safe, including the videos about how they were fogging the planes and how they were making sure that the planes were clean. I can't tell you how many people I sent those videos to who were asking me questions about, is it safe to fly? I need to go check on a loved one. I'm worried about flying. And I was able to send those videos to them and to share communications with them if they hadn't already seen them. So I think that was amazing, the communications that they did, and they were constantly coming out.
And on that theme, tell us about the communications between the board and Ed and his leadership team. How were you and Frank as the chair and your other fellow board members engaged during this period as it unfolded?
Well, it was actually very easy because we were totally aligned. As Ed stated, he was focused on protecting the people, which is the customers and the employees, protecting cash, and then the future of the business. So everybody was aligned with everything they were doing. So at this point, it is about keeping the board informed. And if he asked us to do anything, if they needed an extra meeting, I think the finance committee met a lot, at least initially. If they needed an extra meeting, being available for those meetings whenever they needed them. So there were lots of potentially extra meetings for finance committees, safety and security, audit, and there were a couple of other things, like Ed asked Bill Easter and I to participate on a town hall, which we did. I'm sure Frank participated several times with the employees. So it was about being available to them whenever they needed us. And they didn't ask lightly. I mean, they took it all very seriously. So
And if I could interact, Jim, I just want to thank Kathy and our entire board. Boards are great. We all know the importance of a board from a governance perspective, but you never quite need, speaking as a CEO, a great board like you do in a time of crisis like this. And so my appreciation and the counsel, the support, the encouragement, the leaning in, the ability to say, I don't know, which I'm probably in the early weeks, I said that a lot more than what I did know. And the ability to be vulnerable and to walk this journey together was really, I'll look back on as some of the real important sources of support I received.
Our theme for today's meeting is leadership and culture, the tailwinds carrying Delta forward. I'd like to talk a little bit about the leadership, but the culture. I've been fortunate, as I've been able to fly Delta for many years, and been on the Spirit of Delta many times. The 767 that the employees donated to Delta in 1982. So how has this culture of the family of Delta played into getting through this crisis?
Well, we have amazing people. As you know, you interact with them every time you're on a Delta flight, and the level of service and the passion they have for service is second to none. Forget the airline industry, I think in the service industry more broadly. And they're also a group of people that have been through some hard times. As we mentioned, 9/11, you go back even earlier to the challenges in the Gulf War back in the early 90s, and mergers and bankruptcy and recessions and fuel price spikes and SARS. And, it's it feels like it's an industry that's always somewhat on the edge. And so this wasn't their first real crisis. This was by far the biggest crisis because it had almost a little bit of all of that balled into one. And so they're a hardened group. They're a group that realizes that times can be a thin margin business. We're working, and we've done a good job to fortify our financial situation. But it's a job they love, but they also realize that there's times they have to do extraordinary things as a result. And when I mid-March started to talk to our people openly about what we were seeing and what we were thinking, I was using video channels. I couldn't get people together. I'd write memos, and constantly, I still write memos every week to our people that I also share with the board. But using video to talk about what we're seeing, to give them encouragement, information, but also the hard facts that we don't know a lot, and for them to not just hear that, but to see the angst that you're physically going through, watch the body language. Yes. Just they felt like we were together. We were in this. It was one of the great paradoxes of what we've been through this last year, is that in many ways we've been forced to be separate, but we found through other ways by which we've been never closer and ever more connected in terms of the mission to save the jobs, save the company, and save our humanity. So as a result of that, the culture really responded very, very well to that. And people took time off. The biggest question I had for our people, second to keeping them safe from the virus, is how can we save as many jobs as we needed to? And I set an audacious goal at the start of the pandemic that I didn't want to furlough anybody, and which was unheard of. And honestly, if I didn't know and didn't even really believe I could do that, I thought it's a good goal, but we try to do that. But we did that. We didn't furlough anybody. Yeah. And the reason we didn't furlough anybody is because half the entire company took the better part of last year off without pay for 6-8 months. I mean, it's just incredible. We paid their benefits, and they just sat home. Over 40,000 people, because I asked them to do it. And you talk about culture and a responsibility and accountability, and realizing that's what it's going to take, not just to get through this, it's going to take to save jobs. So many of our senior employees that wanted to save the jobs of the young flight attendants or the young airport agents that couldn't afford to lose their jobs. They said, I just got a nice profit sharing payout. I can sit home for a few months and save that job. So the degree of volunteerism was remarkable. We had never seen anything like this before. And frankly, when I told our team back in March, that's what we had to do, they didn't believe me that we would have the level of subscriptions. I didn't believe it and then people just started rolling in, and then we were talking to them, but we were staying connected with them too, because they were still watching us weekly and they were engaging us and talking to us through the video channel. So it was a unifying fire that we were all going through together, and it's going to forge us as we're now all coming out of this much stronger. The second thing I would say, Jim, is that in the last 5 years, we've hired a lot of new employees to the company. We've been on a real growth spurt, and it's been great, and seeing a lot of new people coming in. But the thing I always talk to our young people about was, don't think that this is an industry that just goes straight up. You know, it's got rocks, and I don't know what that next rock's going to be, and I wasn't looking to find it, but it's going to come. To fortify yourself, and they would hear it, but I don't think they really believed it, because they were seeing so many great things, all the growth and everything. And I talk about what 9/11 was like. I talk about bankruptcy like I used to feel like I was the old guy in the room talking about old war stories. But now they experience the biggest crisis we've ever been through. So now they all feel like they're veterans, and we're all now on the same page, which actually is a good thing.
So that is a great segue into your battle tested. So what lies ahead now?
What lies ahead is we got to keep pushing our company forward. We are back in terms of domestic travel in the U.S. I'd say probably about 80% of our volumes are back. So all of you who are whose businesses are closed, I just want to let you know your employees are traveling. So don't tell me it's not safe to get together with people, because they're all getting together with themselves. And I'm going to say that tongue in cheek. But we're opening our campus next month, and I think the only way we can start getting back together, follow the science, do it safely. We've got all the medical advice around us that we need. But getting people back together and starting to work together more in person is really, really important for the collaboration, the teamwork, the unity. It's, you know, the video screens have gotten tiresome over time. We need to then, as businesses open, we'll start to see the business travel coming back. Business travel today is about 25% of what it should be. I would hope by the fall it'd be up to 50%. Then the third leg in the stool is going to be international. International, you're going to see a little bit of international open up. We're trying hard to get it open, the borders. You'll see a little bit of Europe open this summer, but probably not till the fall where you start to see Europe opening at some level of scale. And Latin America probably late, South America anyway, late this year, early next year. Asia could be a year or two. Asia could take a long time to get open. The vaccination rates in Asia are shocking how low they are. They're low single digits. You know, there's talk in Japan whether they could even put on the Olympics, but the vaccination rate in the country is like 3%.
I want to come back to that whole business travel, looking into the future, but I want to ask Kathy, as Ed just explained some of the changes management has made, how has the board changed as a result of the past 16 months?
No, I really don't think the board has changed so much. I think what happened was we learned, I learned to appreciate the skills the board had, right? And because there were, I mean, when I mentioned earlier, it's a very diverse board. I mean, we have people with energy skills. We have people who in cyber, IT. We have people who, a CEO from a large global company, right? We have people with Washington government and security experience. I mean, so it's a great board, and everybody just did what we needed to do as a board. We came together to support the company and make sure that they had everything that they needed. And the one other thing about culture I wanted to add from what Ed was saying was that I recently saw a video where management was speaking to the employees, but also some of the employees were on that video, and the emotion that they felt in thanking the employees for taking the voluntary leave of absence, saving their jobs, was amazing. So when you say we were all in this together, we were all in this together. The board was in this with the company and all of the employees. We were all in it together. So it wasn't really a need for the board to change per se. So the need was for the board to be available, be supportive, be appreciative, because you think, some people say they were just doing their jobs. Actually, they were doing more than their jobs. Their job descriptions were out the window. They were doing whatever it took to make sure that this company had a bright future coming out of this. And we, as a board, we needed to make sure we showed them how appreciative we were of that.
NACD produced a white paper on board CEO relationships, and they coined the term constructive tension as a viable way where the board is not a rubber stamp. It's a sounding board, but also provides guidance and feedback to the executive team on how they're doing. Were there disagreements? Were there times when, Ed, you wanted to do one thing and then the board said, whoa, wait a minute, you're going too fast or you're going too slow? Did any of that ever occur?
I don't think so.
No.
We were
aligned.
We were walking this journey together. We were talking every few days. There was no real. I mean, we had different questions and different thoughts and learning from different perspectives. But what Kathy said, the focus on protecting the people, protecting the liquidity, protecting the future, that was really clear right from the start. And so once you had those broad parameters in place, no, I don't think there was any real. I mean, I agree with you. I think the constructive nature of the dialogue is really important to have. But and by the way, when you're in a crisis, it's not a good time to sit back and start thinking about new ideas or new thoughts. Or
Right.
I mean, we were in crisis mode, and I felt the relationship actually shifted a touch where, I had to be out in the center of the spear, and the board was providing me as was the employee, and we're just kind of driving hard as one. Normally, you do have a more balanced conversation with the board, but we just didn't have the time, or the challenge was so monumental. Everybody needs to put their oar in the water and start rowing.
And that was okay because we were absolutely aligned on the mission and what he needed to accomplish. And everything he did was along those lines. So it's not like he tried to do something that was out, it was not, within that corridor.
And I would assume that comes from prior to pandemic. There was also an alignment and a constructive dialogue between Ed and the board on an ongoing basis.
Yes.
Ed, going back to the business travel you mentioned earlier and the issues of international travel, it's 3 years from today. Where will business travel be? Has it permanently changed? Will some people say, hey, actually, virtual's pretty good. I don't need to jump on that plane any longer.
I think there will be changes. It's not going to look exactly the same, but my sense is there's going to be just as much of it, but it'll be different. It'll be different because people have changed. I don't think it's, the video technologies, which by the way have been around for years, are going to be the death knell of business travel. I think it's not a substitute. I think it's a complement. So yes, taking a trip to Europe just to have dinner with somebody and then taking a late flight back, just killing yourself. Those days are probably pretty limited. Hopefully they'll be. I gave up on that stuff a long time ago myself anyway. It's not worth it. But what you'll find is as people have moved around, people are going to be using hybrid work experiences. They're not going to be in the offices as much. They'll be living in different parts of the country. They'll be leveraging technology tools. They'll actually have different reasons to travel. They'll have to travel to come into the office rather than have someone travel to see them. So I think travel is something that we are going to take from this pandemic as one of the things that we all miss. I mean, you don't miss the running to try to catch the flight at the last minute, but the connection, the ability to create together and have a spirit of connection is something that the video screen, it's very, very shallow. It doesn't really foster relationships. And so I think people are going to embrace travel, by the way, not just for business. I think there's going to be a whole new category of travel that we're going to see that I spoke on CNN this morning. I was talking about almost like a premium leisure component where people have more time. They're living in different places. The baby boomer society, people now have lost a couple years of travel.
Right.
They got the clock's ticking, right? They got things they got to do and got to go see.
Tell me about it.
And people talk about almost revenge travel.
Yeah.
You're going to have that,
Yeah.
and we're seeing that. We're seeing it because as the vaccinations started to hit critical mass, in the 30, 40, 50% of our country being vaccinated,
Yeah.
the bookings we saw from January to now have more than tripled.
Mm.
The bookings meaning the people booking their plans out into the spring and summer. So, and by the way, that number continues to grow from here. So I think people are going to be making up for lost time, and that's going to be pretty cool.
Moving that to the revenue side of the ledger, if I may, leisure travel normally is that people take advantage of discounted ticketing, whereas business travel is usually more short-term and far more profitable for the airline. If even, let's say 30%, I'm just making that number up, of business travel no longer exists because people, like, as you said, don't want to jump on the plane for a dinner any longer and come back. Is there a diversification strategy that Delta's looking at today?
Yeah, we've been diversifying for some time. So our biggest revenue source at the moment, from this last year anyway, has been our credit card relationship with American Express.
Mm-hmm.
We generate today about $4 billion a year of revenue from Amex, which
Wow.
You mentioned the 16 million actually kind of jumped really high on the stack there in this last year, and growing. One of the things that I'm pretty impressed with is that the spend on the Delta American Express portfolio, that card, is the best performing card in the entire American Express system, period. It's better than any of their own proprietary cards.
Wow.
And it's already, as of March, was already above comparable spend levels in 2019, the Delta card. People wanting the Delta perks, the Delta loyalty. So we all know that consumer wallets are a little thicker for a lot of people these days. The spend that's going on them, while they're not spending it to go take a trip quite yet, they are spending it for other reasons, but wanting those points because they want to go take trips. And that to us is a real lucrative source. So yes, that we're working on. We're going to continue to focus on segmenting our customer base. The classic business traveler is probably going to shrink a touch, but there's other forms of travel that people are going to. Smaller business will be focused probably more on small business travel, and the medium-sized markets as compared to all the large corporates, because those groups actually have been traveling pretty regularly throughout the pandemic. Through the big corporations that got gun shy and send anybody home. The small guy's got to go out and see his customers, because if he doesn't, someone else is going to steal him. All right. So we're thinking differently, but I'm optimistic we're going to have a strong premium revenue base here for the future once we get all these lanes of society back open.
And that's a word I've read many times that you use to describing the Delta experience as a premium experience, not just a quote normal flying experience. Is that a bedrock principle now of the airline as you move forward?
It's something we've been working on for some number of years. One of the reasons the airline industry has historically been financially challenged, it was seen as a commodity, that the main reason why people chose one airline over another was price. It was not service. And when we bought Northwest 10 years ago, we set out deliberately to change that paradigm, because if all we were going to be is just a larger commodity player, you can't make it up on scale if you don't have it. We don't have the cost structure, providing the premium level of service. So we had to distinguish ourselves and differentiate ourselves around reliability, hospitality, service, cleanliness, all the things that you would envision. And one of the big debates in our industry a year ago when the pandemic hit was people were thinking, well, that's the end of the print. No one's going to be, all the business guys, the printers, that's all done. So it's only the adventure seekers, the low cost guys are going to make out, and the spirits of the world are gone. And then there were a lot of venture seekers, and they had more people traveling on them. But what we've already seen has come back. People are choosing to be on Delta because they value their health, their wellness. So that premium actually has an even higher calling in the prioritization as to how you pick your airline of choice, as compared to just being willing to shop it solely on price.
Kathy, carrying that theme forward on a premium experience for a customer, How does that relate to the board? What are the lessons learned that looking back now and looking forward, as Ed has described, where the airline is going? What is the takeaways that the board has learned? And more importantly, where do you see Delta going in the next 3 to 5 years?
So it's interesting. We had a board meeting recently, and we did reflections on the past year, and what worked well, what was more challenging, et cetera. I think the things that I would we took away from that, obviously the thing I said about communication, but also the showing appreciation and making sure that people recognize that we understood that they were working more than their normal kind of business hours. And there was at one point in time, we were very worried about Ed because he had to have been burning it on both ends. He was talking to folks in Washington late at night. He was talking to us early in the morning, and it was on CNBC, et cetera. So, making sure that people understand what you're going through, that we understood, they understood that we understood what they were going through, and that we appreciated all of their efforts, knowing that they weren't normal. Making sure that we are available, as I said, and where they're going to be in 3 years. I'm very optimistic. I think the board's very optimistic about what we've seen to date. The fact that we all talk to people who are flying or who want to fly, right, and explaining what we know about the experience, and that's going to bring more customers to Delta. I have more people telling me every day that because of the things that they did, like blocking the middle seats for as long as they did, and the videos that we showed them about cleanliness, et cetera, that they want to fly Delta now. They are going to be more loyal Delta customers. So I know we brought more people into the franchise. JD Power didn't have to tell me how great they are. I knew that from the very beginning. And so we are all very bullish on what's going to be happening with the company.
Right.
They did an outstanding job.
Right. Well, we want to open up the line for our audience. I know we have numerous questions that have now been developed over the last 45 minutes. So I'm going to pass it back to Milton for audience questions.
Well, Jim, thank you. And Ed and Kathy, again, thank you for your openness and really informative dialogue during the fireside chat. We've had a number of different types of questions. We'll try to consolidate some of them. One is about global competition. Seems though Delta is a real standout. How many airlines around the world have gone under? How did European and Asian government support compare to that of the U.S. government support for airlines?
Well, it's been interesting to watch. The U.S. airline industry broadly has done more to support our industry than we've seen in most international markets. There's been a few markets where governments have stepped in and provided loans. There's been a few where they've kind of facilitated some recapitalization and restructuring. But no one that was as aggressive as our administration was early on, saying, this is a pivotal industry to us. We're not going to let this fail. This wasn't the industry's fault. We're going to get through it. The CARES Act that they provided us, 70% of it was in the form of a grant, recognizing that this was the commitment to keeping our people around. So it was really a payroll support program at the highest level. And that gave us time to restructure. Internationally, I think it's going to be interesting, Milton. It's going to take some time to figure out. You've got a lot of airlines around the world that are in pretty difficult condition. They already were in difficult condition before the pandemic hit. The U.S. industry was doing better than most of the international financial airlines were. But now I think it's going to become that much more challenged. I think you're going to see more consolidation in the international space, more the regional alignment. And for Delta, it's actually going to be good because it's going to be our ability working closely with our partners to hopefully gain more share and do more flying.
Great, thank you. You spoke earlier about the alignment around mission between the board and management. One question we have is, as in going through a major crisis like this, how did the board and management maintain the difference between sort of, deeper involvement in light of the crisis and governance, which, sort of speaks to stepping back a bit and being more objective?
I think that is a fair question because it did get to be challenging, and sometimes you want to be supportive and helpful. And as you have different skills that could be supportive and helpful to a company, you step in where you need to. But you step in as they are asked to, right? So there's still a distinct line between governance and management. So again, it was we didn't have disagreements, but we understood there were certain things that were Ed's decision, and we were there to be supportive. We were there to, if we had some concerns, we could say, maybe you want to think about this, or can you do it this way? So make suggestions. But there were things that were absolutely management's decisions. We never, tried to cross that line, tried to be supportive in helping him think through everything as he was making his decisions, but not crossing the line.
Thank you. There are a couple of questions here that are kind of similar to each other, so I'll combine them. Folks asking are okay with that. One is about ransomware and the Colonial Pipeline, and then really combined with that, we seem as a society go from one crisis to the next. What do you think the next crisis will be, and how's the board monitoring situations like the Colonial Pipeline and impact on supply and ability to keep the flights operating?
Well, the Colonial situation, fortunately, is starting to come back. The pipeline started operating again last night. It's going to take us a couple of days to restore the service. We realize in our industry that outages occur. So we have some pretty big supplies. So we were never at risk at Delta of running out of fuel for our airplanes, unlike the gas stations around town who don't have the storage capacity. Over here at Hartsfield, we carry on average anywhere between 14 to 20 days of supply, either on premise or off premise tanks, and this is by far the biggest need we had. We've got, but the concern is broader, is less around fuel, more around cyber. We are adamant, and Kathy's on the audit committee, and we've got one of our board members, Dave DeWalt, is a cyber expert. He's got every special clearance, I imagine, known to that world. He formerly ran FireEye, Mandy, and he's deeply engaged, full-time subject matter expert. Ash Carter, former Secretary of Defense, who's no spring chicken around this topic. I mean, the understanding the government's understanding in the defense world of cyberspace, given that's where more wars are being waged these days than ever before. So, and we have a very active board discussion on a regular basis as to cyber and the investments we're making. We probably spend, Milton, somewhere between $30 to $50 million a year on investments just in cyberspace, keeping our skills fresh, because it's a moving target. And if there's one thing I really do, I try not to miss any sleep at night, despite how challenging this crazy industry can be. That's the one space I do feel most vulnerable around, and needing to have the experts manage it, because it's such a hard, complex, technical area that can bring you down overnight.
I can certainly see where that would be an area where you've got to make sure you've got great expertise and also tremendous and constant focus. You mentioned earlier that there were those who volunteered to save the jobs of others. We have a question. Is there something that the company will do for those who made that sacrifice in the future?
Sure. When they made the decision to volunteer, we gave them positive space travel passes so that they can actually book on confirmed, not for this past year, but to the future. So they'll have some travel related benefits. But we also, many of those people made the ultimate decision to sacrifice their job for someone else. We later in the year, we offered an early retirement arrangement. So we had close to 20% of our people retire, and it was a very good arrangement. I think it was very generous, particularly given our circumstances, but in reflection of just the nature of who those people were, recognizing them. So right now, as we're positioned to coming back out, we're already a 20% smaller company. So to the extent business travel doesn't fully come back or other parts of our business are down, we've already right-sized our cost structure. Our fleet is down about 20%. I know it'll break everyone's heart to hear that the MD-80s and the MD-90s have all been retired. We've gotten rid of a ton of those small regional jets. The older 767s, the older 757s have been retired. But we've kept up a steady stream of the newest technology. The 321s and the Airbus 220s and the 350s are continuing to come. The 777s we did retire during the crisis, so you won't be able to fly on a Delta 777 anymore. But we took the good stuff out of it, the lie flat seats, and we're continuing those on more planes going forward. So we really did use the crisis to refresh the face of the company, to get smaller, to downsize it. And we'll be back out in the market hiring, later this year, as we're starting to see business come back probably faster than we thought. I always knew in this business that you can lose it faster than you ever thought, and it'll come back faster than you can ever imagine. And I said that right at the beginning, and that's indeed what's happened. Because when you're in that dark spot, while you're in the waiting, the dawn always darkest before the dawn, the skies. That's when it was a little concerning. But as we've seen it come back, it's coming back with a vengeance.
And
That's
the
really
commitment
great.
that they made right before the pandemic hit, they made a significant commitment, a sustainability commitment about their fuel usage, et cetera. And so what they did with the planes actually helped as well. So, they kept all of that in mind as they were refreshing the fleet. So now they have more fuel efficient planes, which helps them with the commitment that they made, which they are sticking to, by the way, the company is sticking to. So.
Another question we have, you commented about the great support that happened for American airline companies compared to the help that offshore companies had from their governments. Were there any restrictions with the government funding received by Delta that will affect your future operations?
Yes, there were some cost to the support. First of all, we're having to pay back 30% of it. So 70% was in a grant and 30% was in the form of a long-term low interest loan. It was all heavily negotiated back in March of last year during the whole development of what the package would look like. There's executive compensation restrictions, caps placed on the compensation of any non-contract employee. Our pilots tend to be fairly well compensated, but they put $425,000 as the ceiling. Anyone who made more than $425,000 can't make any more than that for the next several years, until I think it goes out to 2023 at some point. So that's a pretty harsh impact, particularly as people get promoted into new jobs. You can't give them comp for it. It's a bit difficult. It's punitive for something we didn't do anything wrong. But we understand coming out of the financial crisis in the banking industry, the government needed to ensure that they send a strong message that government support has impact, as cost to it attached. And then at the executive level, my comp's been cut by probably 30 to 40% based on the restrictions in place, and will be for several years. And then you take the stock below that, it's down a lot. It's probably this last year, my comp, and it's fine, I'm not complaining, was down 70% this past year. But that's perfectly fine with me. I mean, as a leader, you need to lead by example. And so it'll take several years before the compensation can get back close to where it was pre-pandemic.
Well, again, Ed, Kathy, thank you so much. You've been very open with your answers and very informative. And I know that we've all learned a lot about how to work through very, very tremendous large crisis and come back on the other side. And you've been a textbook in terms of how to work through it and how to come back strong. And we're proud to have you be a part of our great community here in Atlanta and across the country and around the world. So again, thank you. And what I'd like to do now, if I
Hey,
could, is-
Milton, can I say one other thing? I didn't say it enough during, I thank all of you too, because this is a big village. You know, we are the largest employer in town, in the state. We are in the largest airport in the world right here at Hartsville Jackson. While this has been very focused on all the actions Delta took, our customers, I can't tell you how many notes I'd receive and continue to receive on a daily basis. Keep going. We're behind you. We can't wait to start flying you. We're watching what you're doing. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of notes a week that I would personally receive from people. And it just gave us so much strength that we are bringing the airline back, not for ourselves, but for you. And so the fact that we knew you all were behind us and you can't wait to get back with us gives us all a real warm feeling and the motivation we needed to keep going during those most difficult of times.
we're certainly behind you, and we thank you for your leadership and the difference that you make. We also have some events coming up that we want to make people aware of, and with the time we have left. We've got our expert series with Stout, Transforming Consumer and Public Engagement, the Takata Airbag Recall Experience on May 26th. On June 10th, we've got an expert series with Houlihan Lokey, SPACs, What Directors Should Know. And believe it or not, our new program year starts up in September. We'll be here before you know it. Our first signature event is The Future of Work with Benjamin Pring. I also want to mention to our audience that we benefit by having your feedback through the surveys. That survey is available online. Please, if you would fill it out, it helps us build better programming in the future. And so with that, I will again thank Ed Bastian, Kathy Waller, the good folks from the family of Delta, and all of you who are here with us today for the support that you bring and for be it your openness. And I'll with that, I think we've asked all the questions we have, and that concludes our program for today. Thank you for being here.